welcome to the dungeon with Harlan and Andrew.
Hi, hello. Here we are with another episode of The Dungeon. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this Thursday. I'm getting better at time and days, even though this show is always on the same day. I'm Harlan Kelly. And today, as every week, we have a guest, but this week we have Starshine, the DM's Guild writer and TTRPG creator. Thank you so much for joining us on The Dungeon. And, yeah, go ahead. Do it. Poach away, Andrew. You take it. Oh, hold on. I messed it up. I talked such a big game.
Muted.
I talked such a big game before this started. I was like, guys, don't worry. This week I went through all my OBS stuff to make sure it's right, and
I said
everyone
monkey's
but
paw.
Harlan.
Yeah.
They said everyone but Harlan is muted.
Yep. Okay,
You
so
didn't
let's
want you
just.
having that question. That's why.
Yeah, that's why. All right, Andrew. Let's just take it from the
Okay.
top. You go for
Back
it.
at it. I think we're back. I'm Andrew Overdahl. This is our live talk show where we chat with people who run and create role-playing games about role-playing games. And hopefully everyone can hear us. We have a very special guest in this week's episode. We have Starshine, a DM's Guild author, if I may say so, a prolific content creator for role-playing games. Thanks so much for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
And one question we like to ask right up off the top of that, it didn't even matter that we were muted for the first question because everyone watching knows that we always ask the same first question. But we were just curious what your personal history was with role-playing games and how you came to discover them.
So yeah, it was through university for me. So my university was weird in that there wasn't really a role-playing group, but other groups would sometimes just randomly do role-playing things. And that was mostly LARP games. So my early stuff is Vampire, when that was a LARP. I can't remember if that would be Masquerade or Requiem. I can't remember when Requiem came out.
So
either
you didn't
way,
start with
Vampire.
D&D.
I don't actually know.
Okay.
We did them all sort of the same time. So there was a lot of like, we're going to start doing this game, and then that would fall through, then you do something else. One of my earliest games was Airship Pirate, which is a game I realized no one has mentioned, I think, for at least 10 years, because it was distressingly average. That's how I would put it. It was quite fun as a LARP, but you'd realize midway through you stopped reading the rules 2 weeks ago, and at this point you might as well just be an Amdram performance of Pirates of Penzance. But yeah,
I've
got
never
in,
heard of that.
I think it was a tie-in with the band Abney Park, or they pushed it, or something like that. I know you can only get it via some obscure methodology, which I didn't know at the time.
Wow. But came into LARPing. So you started with LARPing and then switched to tabletop?
Yeah, and then obviously at the time people were like, hey, we can do this other game and this other game and this other game. That's how I got D&D and GURPS and everything else there. Obviously, I was quite restricted because this was north of England. The way we got games was we had to go to toy stores because that was the only place that was stocking them. So there was one toy store we'd buy books from, and it was, at the back, it had book games. This was like role-playing games and like 400 word games to play with your children and books like that. Like, I'll teach your kids how to play patter cake. It's like so much of my game choice then wasn't really I want to play this game as much as there are 3 books on offer. We've played the other 2, so time to do the third one left, and often that was GURPS.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool though. It's an odd framing of it, but I feel like that gives you a unique into it too. That it's not this like bunch of grognards in the back being like, "Let's do it right now, this way."
Yeah, I think it definitely informed a lot of how I work. I will say that. That's basically slang for me saying I'm a dramatic bitch, but that's fine.
Well, you are someone who's very prolific with at least in Andrew and I's opinion, because we can't put anything out. We overthink it. We get stuck trying to figure out how to finish something. So what?
Yeah, you're a perfect guest for 2021, because that is our low key theme for 2021. It's like, how do you finish a project and put it out into the world? Because a lot of people that we know, us included, will work on some type of content, and then it just gets to a certain point, and then it kind of just gets dumped at the roadside. So you seem to be the opposite, in that you have a lot of cool stuff out there that you've actually finished and created.
I would argue, have you considered spite as a motivator? It's very good.
Yeah.
I think after a while, you just get to the point of just having to learn to say, fuck it, this is done. I don't care if it's perfect. It's just fucking done.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of ways you can do that. So I'm always reminded, there's a quote, and I don't know where it came from, but you hear it re-quoted quite a lot, of the gods have deemed me worthy to live another day, and I'm going to make that everybody's problem. Is kind of where I come from with stuff. It's like, you've got to just put stuff out, and eventually you just kind of learn, like, this is what this is, and if it isn't moving any further. I would say a good thing to have is friends who can... I don't like the term accountability buddies, because it kind of makes it sound a bit like a cult.
Yeah.
But having friends who will be there to sort of kick you through the smaller things will also... I'm really lucky. A couple of my friends will be there like, you could probably keep going with this. I'm like, yeah, but they're also enough to listen to me when I say, this just isn't working. And like, yeah, okay. I'm not going to force you to do something you don't like, but they know me enough to be able to say, I think you're just annoyed more than anything else.
Yeah.
I would also say just trying to have fun with it. Like, no one likes creating things they hate. And this is a thing we see. If you follow art history, you'll see this a lot, of just artists getting fed up and then stuff never getting done, and they're told, you've got to finish this, and it becomes awful.
Yeah.
Very famous, there was a talk about Da Vinci who ruined a mural because he was told, must work 4 hours a day, and then he just fucked it up because he just didn't work like that's not how he worked. So you've got to find how you work and sort of work with yourself. I'm always a big believer in having several things on the go for this reason. Just because it means when you get bored with something, you can jump to something else, and then eventually something will hit completion.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I try to do, and I have like 35 projects at work. I was curious, in your creative process, like, how important is playtesting, and do you have like a system for playtesting?
Playtesting is important, but it's costly. This is a thing that comes up a lot in indie circles, is we'd all love to do proper convention playtesting, but I sit there and looked into it last year for something, and it's like, to hire the people on, to get the table, to get the venue, it would cost me about a couple of $1,000s, which I don't have. The game isn't going to make that much money.
Yeah.
So eventually you have to sort of balance that. I would say it's important, and I play games a lot myself, just even like sitting there playing 4 characters and just going round.
Yeah.
And just showing it to people. So I think there's a good thing to do is to take a part of it you're not sure of and test the shit out of it, especially major parts. You don't need to run a full game. So when I was doing the Labour Dispute Before Christmas, for part of that, most of my testing was these basically setting up scenarios and then going through them to see, okay, if I draw cards X, Y, and Z, and this deck draws X, Y, and Z, what statistically am I going to get the chance to pull, and does this work? Does this break? Unfortunately, with indie games, you're always going to have that thing. You're never going to have that polished experience, like the same as someone like D&D can have, because they can afford to hire on however many people they want for however many months they want. So hone in on things you think need testing, see if you can recruit friends. If not, playing it yourself works.
Yeah.
And I would even point out, even with the Wizards of the Coast thing, how many Magic cards have come out that are just broken? It happens. Like, sometimes even the best laid plans, someone will think of something and then you have no idea about it. I've broken so many video games when I've played them.
Yeah.
Just because I did something really stupid and the dev never thought someone would be that idiotic.
Yeah, I like that video game comparison too, because like so many games are fun to break. You know, like you don't break a video game and then you're like, oh, this game's bad now. It's like, oh, look at this silly thing I can do. And I feel like
I think it's when you look at speedrunning as well. Speedrunning community is really interesting for this because, you know, there are issues, and there are issues.
Yeah.
When you're testing, you're hoping to get rid of the issues that make the game crash. If it sets a computer on fire, that's bad. If a player, stacks 4 cabbages, jumps left on a certain frame, and then warps through a wall, if you don't fix that's not a big deal, because someone's going to have to spend a lot of time working on that. And to be honest, they're probably going to be really happy when they work that out.
Yeah, I love that. Andrew, let's write this down. That mistakes or like things not being perfect doesn't have to be like a game ruining thing. Like people's fun won't be ruined by that, right? Like
Yeah, especially in an RPG where in theory people can do anything.
Yeah.
So to try to, unlike a video game where it's like, well, you can quantify the decisions that they could do. In a role-playing game, there's an insane amount. I mean, they can even from the very first instance, they can just like not respond to your quest giver. They can be like, no, we're not going, and we don't care about this.
And things like that.
The whole thing you just wrote is now worthless because they're just not going to do it. So
yeah, and there is kind of that contract, that table contract, to just not go out of your way to do something ludicrous for the sake of it. And I'm reminded of, there was, I think it was 3.5 had a spell and an expansion that had like summoning the amount of an object you needed for the specific task. And it went around online a bit because the specific task wasn't defined. E.g., if my task was to obliterate the world in mayonnaise, then I just shake it and there it goes. Because they presume the task was I'm making an egg sandwich. So it's like, oh, players could break the game. So yeah, but if a player did that, you'd probably say, oh, well done, but can we not obliterate the world in mayonnaise, please?
This is good. This is such good advice. I like that. Because you don't need to have everything just right. You don't need to have everything perfect. Like I've been reading a bunch of the 2E like Planescape stuff. I'm trying to like read it from like front to back of like publication order, and there's so much contradictory stuff in there. There's so much stuff that barely makes any sense,
and as a DM guild writer, that's something I have to factor in, because I can say, oh, they're using this, but they could be using 5 other supplements. I don't know how those interact. Like, I'm sure one of the items I've made could do something horribly broken if you mix it in with 4 other things. But it's physically impossible for me to spend every day going through every new release and going, oh, this might have an interaction if the player's on top of the mountain or something. It's got to go, well, sorry, the DM has to fix that. And that's your table's choice. If you want to allow that to happen, go for it. Yeah. If you want to say, cool, but can we do something else? That's your table's contract, and it's not me to get in the way of that.
Have you ever had someone like play one of the games or adventures that you've created and you've like witnessed them break it, and like in a fun way, or
I've been told of a few things. There was a podcast that played "You Have One Ability, the ability to fuck this up," where they had a statistically unlikely series of rolls where they fuck it up repeatedly. So I think it ended up with 4 people dead, which is impressive because you can't die in that game.
Yeah.
So they picked it because I think it was literally the legendary pinball fuck up. They had started doing something and that fucked up and that fucked up, which is exactly what I was aiming for. But it's still like, I never expected someone to get 10 negative rolls in a row, because that's 5%, 15% chance technically. But they did it, and it was brilliant. My other personal I've heard is the Trinket Busters weapons collection. Someone took my personal favorite weapon and obliterated a boss in one hit with it.
Wow.
What was the weapon?
Don't tell him. Don't tell Andrew.
The Superb Duelist Sword, which basically means you can, as its special ability, you can use an action to put other weapons into it. And then it rolls all of the weapons in one go. Of course, it destroys them all and itself in the process, so it's a one-time use. But someone had basically hoarded, I think, like nearly 150 swords.
Dumped them all in.
Shove them all in.
That honestly sounds like a fun session. That sounded like a great.
Yeah, it sounded brilliant, and it was exactly what I built it for. Because it's like this: you have this really ludicrous thing. You can use it once and once only, so think carefully.
Yeah. Man, I love, you've mentioned some of your game titles, but I just want to read a couple of these off real quick because they're so fun. My favorite is Attack and Dethrone God. The one of you mentioned is you only have one ability, the ability to fuck this up. Help! I want to play a game, but I can't find my D1. Bust Blockers, which is a Blockbuster joke. The 'twas the labor dispute before Christmas. Like I was so excited that you were willing to come talk to us, because this is just like a vault of like I'm just reading these games is fun.
It's great until you try and promote via Twitter, then you realize, oh, this game's a sentence. Oh, god damn it, there goes half my tweet, and then it's 13 characters for the link.
What gets you going to start a game? Like some of these are so fun, and you can see like
literally, it comes from anywhere. Like it's a lot of my games tend to start from I want to emulate something, or I just have usually so many of my ideas start with, wouldn't it be really stupid if you did X? So this game takes place entirely in a Mega Mall parking lot. Was just this random idea I had, inspired by a very old game I played years ago now, called Pick Up the Phone Booth and Aisle, which is a text adventure which is set in a aisle of the shopping mall, and you have one turn to do whatever you want. And there's a phone booth there, and the game was basically built around just here's a load of endings. There's no middle to them.
Yeah,
like just type in die, get naked. But because of that very limited location, it could do lots of weird stuff. For instance, my favorite thing I always remember that game is dance, waltz, and waltz with phone booth all give very different endings.
Yeah.
So yeah, and sometimes like I want to emulate this specific style of genre. So Fuck This Up was basically me wanting a game that was inspired by old Three Stooges and Chuckle Brothers sort of stuff. Where it's just like, hey, we have a job. Does it matter what we were doing before this job? No. The Dowress has said we need to move a piano. And then everything just goes wrong from there. Labor Dispute for Christmas was just... I just wondered, it's like, wouldn't it be really funny to unionize a load of elves? And I kind of sat there going, that would be quite amusing. And then just built from there.
Yeah.
We had a good question in chat, kind of on that same tack. How do you entice players to take a quest? Like in your adventure design, is there any like guiding philosophy you have to get them on board?
Give them something tangible. I saw something out in real life. If someone came up to you and went, forsooth, please go and fetch me my milk, good sir, you would tell them, shove it. I'm not... You've got to give them a reason to be invested. And it's the same with any sort of plot hook, call to adventure. Why is this important? Like, fetch me this milk because I need to defeat the dire cow, and you do it by throwing cartons of 2% at it. Give a reason and why that has value and stakes. So I think it's the same with... You can look into a lot of like TV design that has the same thing. If a character has no reason to do something, then them doing it looks silly. So you have to lay down sort of... I always say sort of who, what, why, where, when is for primary schoolers, but it works.
Yeah.
Who is giving this? Why are they giving this? And what's the timescale?
Yeah. And that silliness is right, too, because I feel like both when you're writing adventures and DMing for, players that you know about or characters that you know about, a treasure hoard might not entice a group of people, but like a dog getting beat up is gonna make the players jump right on it or whatever. Like having this like knowing your audience, I think works really well with those specific things. Yeah. With
the last game I ran, like the group were very big on. They certainly really didn't just one day like, we don't like this guy who runs a mine. Fuck him in particular. So if I wanted to get something like, he's involved in this. Oh, off we go to beat him up then.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sticks are out and we're all going, but it's giving that stake. And sometimes it is also a case, especially with early quests, sometimes there is the element of just being, hey, we need to start the plot.
Yeah.
And I was a big believer in sometimes you don't need crafty backdoor story tricks. Sometimes it's fine to say, hey, we have 2 hours a week. This is what we're kind of aiming to do. Because we could spend the next 4 hours looking under tables for switches, but do we want to spend 4 hours looking under tables for switches?
Right.
Not really.
Yeah, it's an underrated act, just asking the players out of game, what do you guys want to do? Like, what do y'all want to do? Well, Andrew, I feel like I cut you off on questions like twice tonight, so I'm trying to be nice and give you room to ask a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you... I browsed all of your work on DM's Guild. Do you ever do any game design in like for like other properties or just for like your own,
I make
creations?
I make my own stuff all the time. I make my own systems quite a lot. I don't do much with other non D&D systems right now, just because of you have to balance. There's a lot of licensing stuff that goes into stuff, and
Yeah.
that can become an absolute pain some days. Just knowing sort of what I'm allowed to mention from your book, and if I'm making a lot of news, I kind of prefer to make my own stuff. Just because I think it's easier to get people to play. This whole news is around saying, hey, you need to buy this version of Vampire, and then you can put this setting over it. Like, to go, here's a setting. Want to play it in Quest? There you go. Want to play it in Vampire? There you go. Want to play it while playing Jenga? If you want. I don't know how you could do that, but again, your table, your job.
Right.
Yeah. I've written it down. After that, death of the author. But please let me live.
That's it. I like that idea though of like making a setting and then just being like, you can put whatever system you want behind that. That's pretty cool.
It's been a regular joke in some of my games of me having like lists of what you need and then but whatever I'm not coming to check as one of the bottom ones because I'm not. If you decide you will do this differently, I'm not going to come to your house and beat you up.
That's good. I like that. I know I was looking at Attacking the Throne God because it looks very fun and chaotic to play, and I really enjoy that the lists include a ball of yarn and the motivation to kill a god. So yeah,
I do like putting that in. That was referencing a very specific thing as well. That was a Fox News element. Because the phrase
I remember when somebody said that
they were quoting the Weather Underground organization manifesto, but the Weather Underground never said that. It's this weird thing that became attributed to them.
It's a fun level of absurdity that I appreciate.
Yeah, just felt.
That's so. What's do you have any other favorite games that I think another thing, Andrew, I've been diving into a lot more lately is just other systems outside of D&D that are scratching an itch that D&D isn't. Do you have any that are some of your favorites to play, especially someone who's making so many?
I have so many. I'm constantly reading new games. I'm doing a lot of solo stuff recently just because we can't leave the house right now.
Right.
I'm stuck in this box. So a lot of stuff using the Wretched and Alone system, which is a brilliant to build off. There's a really good game of that by a guy called Cody Falk called Rain in Hell, which is basically like, do you want to play a Dio cover? And I'm like, yes, I do. It's brilliant. What have I been playing? Another creator called Deus Ex Minima, I believe, made a game called Hope Is Not a Plan, which is basically corporate survival, which is a really fun little solo concept, especially for someone who does project management sometimes. Like, it gave me the most delightful trauma flashbacks.
That's cool. And these are both of those are solo games?
Yes.
I haven't played too many of those. But Andrew just got me a cool one that I had almost sitting here, but I don't. That's a new concept for me. What's besides like, only having the option to really be doing it? What do you like about them?
I enjoy writing stories myself. Like I write on the side, so it's a nice way of doing that. I think it's also they're fun because they're kind of easy to get into. Like there isn't that sort of I have to prepare for a week, have to get 4 other people, corral them into a hole so we can actually do this. It's nice to be able to go, hey, I've got 25 minutes. I can pull out that game and play that and then be done. And there is a convenience factor which I really enjoy about so. It's why I've been making so many of them because I've been playing so many of them. It's just nice to go, so what I want to do, and said so many of them have this option for basically for writing your own story, and being really selfish with that story.
Yeah,
because I do not have to give a crap about what other players are doing. I can just be like, hey, it's me versus effectively gravity in this deck of cards. If I want to go off in some weird tangent, I can go off on some weird tangent. I saw there's someone did a really sweet log of their play of bus blockers, and it became more of their personal memoir because they worked in I believe it was a blockbuster for a Hollywood video, like very near the end of the company. They worked in one and they actually wrote it, and it became more of this little memoir where the game slowly faded away, and it was them going, I hadn't realized how interconnected my store was with its sort of location. Yeah. And that's the nice thing, like, because you're on your own, you can make these stories. You can decide, actually, I'm going to start writing this in a different way or handling it in a different way and sort of just slowly build from there.
Yeah, because you're not like, I feel like the point of a balanced game or, balanced adventure is so everyone at the table feels like they're participating in a way that is fun for them. And, it's not just one person crushing all the monsters or whatever. But that's like a fun way where you don't need to worry about balance, where you can just like
and you can sort of
fall
think
down whatever rabbit hole.
There's a vague meditative. I think it's a sort of a meditative aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
Just sort of being alone with your thoughts. It's a very nice thing. I really recommend people looking into them because they are really interesting. And I think they do help your DMing a lot as well because they're a good way of practicing improving and linking stories together because most of them are very much prompt based. So it's like, hey, think about this, or what does this mean in this context to this character? And that slowly helps you sort of think on your feet about, hey, this could work for this character I'm DMing, or this could work for my main tabletop character.
That's good advice. It's a good point. Sharpen DMs up there. Sharpen your tool set.
Sharpen them up. We have some more questions in chat, but first let's do our roll table just to make sure we have enough time. Do you have a D20 and we have this roll table? Whoa, my gosh.
I thought visually interesting.
Yeah.
Best one we've seen so far on the show, I have to say.
19.
19. All right, let's go.
Pull it up. Okay, a 19. Oh, okay. This is a carryover from the 2020 list, but I left it on here because I liked it and I wanted to hear more answers. Yeah, it's just give us your most blood curdling scream. No, it is. What is and I guess I could tweak this question for you. I'd say, what is your most memorable boss battle that you've either run or that you created? Like if you have one in one of your
this is hard. There's a couple of interesting ones I've run, which probably the most interesting one didn't end up in the book actually because it was a bit too complicated and involved fiddling. It was basically this was the last campaign I ran, which had a sort of recurring theme of basically sort of Disney princess archetypes, but they'd all been flipped. So there was one who was imagination, except she was nightmares. But that was an interesting fight because the whole point was if you could make her think about something, she would rebuild the world around her to think about it.
Oh, dang.
So you could use skill checks on her repeatedly. So if you were to say like, oh, religion check, think about, this god, your environment would change to be a temple for that god because she just can't help herself. She's literally a reality warper, has no control. If it's in her head, it's real now. So that meant the players were able to do things like think about location. Oh, we're on a mountain, then push her off for damage.
Yeah. But how did she fight back against that then? Like
she had a load of. She could basically do minion summons and had a load of being able to force back her reality onto you.
I see.
She also had a really annoying choir dude who would run around and be a real pain. Basically, his job was to obstruct the players from getting close enough. So half the job was finding a way to separate them and slowly pull them apart.
I see. Man.
Which went well, actually. And that guy was just a lot of fun to play because he was just this over-theatrical, I will chew every single piece of scenery in the room if I have to kind of dude. He was very, very influenced by sort of the 1940s Phantom of the Opera kind of Lon Chaney style of like, oh, yes, my queen will not fall. And then I think he ended up dying because he got hit on the head by a falling rock.
That does it,
It was literally Chunky Salter in action.
Inglorious end for any.
Which my players loved because it was so fitting that he had this whole glorious thing and just died from a rock on the head. It was like, hey, despite all that, you're still immortal.
Yep. It's a good lesson.
Avoid rocks. Very good lesson.
To the head, yeah. Well, do we have a couple more questions to chat? It seems we do.
Yeah, let's pick. There's a good one here. This is kind of like a question that maybe we should ask more frequently because it's always a good question, and I think we always get a different answer. But what makes a good DM to you?
Ooh. Kindness. I would say at the end of the day, they're a person doing a thing. Kindness is always important. Hostile tables are just sucky. in general. And this is, I know you do hear the horror stories of people who just have absolute horrible people. I think you've got to be kind and accepting and just sort of be ready to do things. And part of that is appreciating that players are giving you time, and at the same time you're giving them your time, and just sort of being ready to deal with problems and just being a nice person. Like, I wouldn't want to play a game with someone who I actively hate.
Yeah, I mean, I've had games where people did not really get along, and it really comes through in the game. It's hard. I've never seen anyone, to my knowledge at least, successfully cooperate in a convincing way in a role-playing game if they didn't get along outside.
Is that DMing skills can be taught, they can be learned, they can be practiced, or you can buy things that cover. Like, if you don't want to do it, buy an adventure. You can do all that, but you can't, or at least you can't teach basic human kindness.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but that involves getting them in nursery school, and that gets awkward.
Yeah, that's a job for a trained professional.
Yeah, that's them and their priest or their psychologist discussion, not one I want to be having at the table.
Right.
So I'd rather have a DM who has no idea what they're doing and is vaguely improvising, who can just be enjoyable to spend time with.
Yeah, I think that's 100%.
That's such
goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, I want to say this one more question before we get out of here, and it's how do you gauge the difficulty of puzzles to create for a campaign? And I think puzzles doesn't. I don't think that needs to be riddles, but I just think
it's difficult. It's because obviously everyone's working from different bases of knowledge, and that base of knowledge is different from your character's base of knowledge.
Yeah.
This is, I think, I've seen this in a few different games where you have a riddle and it's like, oh, this would be really obvious to the character. It's like, it's not obvious to me.
Yeah.
Because like, I haven't spent 4 years in a convent to Mornar or whatever. I'm a writer, so I don't go out very much. I think a good option is always to have several solutions and not having one overly specific fixed solution. I'm a big believer in the thing of if a player hits something that makes logical sense, that's the answer now.
Yeah.
Like if the old, I think it was from the one book where they have the thing of what walks on two legs in the morning, 4 in the morning, 2 in the noon, and then 3 at night. She answers, I think it's a Neil Gaiman book actually. She answers a dog because their circus dog does a trick in the evening, which is standing on one leg up, and she gets let through because that's her answer, and it's technically correct. And I work on the same thing. If a player says something in it, I can see your logic there and it makes sense. There's no point holding people up. Yeah. So judge difficulty carefully and give outs for situations where you might just get a moment where everyone has a brain fart, or that piece of common knowledge you thought was common knowledge isn't common knowledge. And then from there, just have these out and just be prepared to have an option for players if they can't work it out.
Yeah, I'm always surprised by some puzzles where I'm like, this is so easy. They're going to think it's a waste of their time. And their thought process is so different that they don't even get remotely close to solving it because they think it's something else entirely. And so, having an out that works narratively is great because it sucks to have to kind of pull back the curtain on the game and be like, here's the answer, and the box opens, and then they're like, oh, okay. Like,
it always sticks to me because I've seen puzzles where obviously I grew up in the UK, so that means I've seen puzzles in like escape rooms in Canada which rely on you knowing some really obscure piece of Canadian trivia, which my group of immigrants, what's that? Oh, this is obvious. No, it's bloody not. What NHL team plays at this stadium? Sorry, I don't know. I'm never going to know, so
I don't know either. So
we can sit here for the next 4.5 hours trying to process of elimination, start naming stadiums, or you would have some other option of that makes about logical sense.
I think good DM advice: don't make your puzzles about hockey. Just don't do it.
Or do NHL the RPG.
That's a great takeaway from this interview.
But it's just puzzles.
It's just my first is in puck, but not in penalty box.
No hockey action whatsoever.
Like wrong answers only type of thing. This is fun.
Only if it allows actual fighting at the table. So just have to punch someone now and again, and then limited edition comes with a free Zamboni.
Nice.
Horrifying. Well, cool. Thank you so much for
Thank you for
coming to
having
hang
me.
out. Is there anything you want to plug specifically before we take
Myself
off here?
and 2 charity bundles that are currently going, which I'm involved in. One of them you'll have 3 days to get. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you've probably already missed it. Have a look anyway. It's called Layout Level Up. It is buying keys for Affinity Publisher for TTRPG creators, specifically ones who are marginalized or just have any money. That is a great tool, Affinity. It's basically whatever Adobe's publishing software is called, without their really stupid subscription model. That contains, I think, about 60 games, and the other one I'm involved in is A Solo But Not Alone. That is raising money for Jasper's Game Day, which is an anti-suicide charity, which after 2020, basically, I worked out the other day, between those 2 bundles, if you buy them both, you will get 154 games for $30, which should legally be stealing. That is a lot of games. From me, you'll get The Forecast, which is a weather simulator based on the shipping forecast, and Magical Malfeasance, which is a Madoka-inspired magical girl game, where you're trying to avoid getting murdered horribly.
Well,
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so many games.
That's very cool.
For good causes. So we threw the link to both of those in the chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure and check out, below here is a link to Starshine's Twitter page, and your website beautifully lays it out for everyone. It's so easy to check out all the games that you've made. So
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with us and
thank you for having me.
Talking to us about games. Andrew, you want to take us out here?
Yeah, thanks everybody in the chat for tuning in and hitting us with your questions. We'll see you next week. And yeah, in the meantime, tip your DM.
Tip your DM. All right. See you later,
Thanks,
everybody.
see ya.